right, this is problem card and data card number 2 from activity 3, proportional relationships. And in this card, here's the graph, and they want you to graph 23 cups of flour. If you're given 23 cups of flour, how much salt do you need? So this is a comparison between cups of flour and salt. And so here's the table that they give you. And again, what's going into your information is the number of cups of flour. So in the end, you're going to have 23 cups of flour. How much salt do you need for that? So that tells me I'm going to put the number of units of flour, the value for flour, label the flour along the x-axis, and grams of salt is going to go along the y-axis. And so once again, the number of units in the vertical direction is the y value, and the number of units in the horizontal direction is the x value. And because this is a proportional relationship, that is the same as the coordinates. It's that slope triangle pushed right up against the origin. And so the y coordinate is the number of grams of salt that you need, and the x coordinate is the number of cups of flour that you need. So this relationship, the number of grams of salt, the number of cups of flour, is equal to grams of salt to cups of flour. And you can use these numbers. It's going to give you the unit rate. So for 1 cup of flour, how many grams of salt do you need? So start working with these. Look at these numbers and see if you can pick out an easy pair of numbers. Actually, both of these aren't too bad. But whenever you divide by 10, this is just going to keep the same digits. They're just going to slide over one place value smaller. So actually, I went to the 10 grams of salt first and the 4 cups of flour. 10 divided by 4 is 2.5. And you could think of $1 divided by 4 quarters is 25 cents. So $10 divided by 4 would be $2.50, or 2.5 in this case. So it's actually 2.5 grams per 1 cup. So that's the unit rate. This is the constant of proportionality. This is going to be the slope of the graph. This is the unit rate. And there was one more. Can't remember what that is. All right, so 25 grams of salt for 10 cups of flour. That again is the same as 2.5 grams of salt for 1 cup of flour. So again, that is the unit rate, constant proportionality, and slope. All right, the number of units in the vertical direction compared to the number of units in the horizontal direction is equal to the grams of salt per cups of flour. So you need 2.5 grams of salt for every 1 cup of flour. And so you can read this in this direction. So the value for y is 2.5 times the value for x. So you can actually draw this arc around here and say the value for y is 2.5 times the value for x. And if you just write that as an equation, the value for y, or the distance or the number of units in the vertical direction, is 2.5 times the number of units in the horizontal direction, going back to that slope triangle. So once again, the number of units in the vertical direction, that's the number of grams, is 2.5 times the number of units in the horizontal direction, or the number of cups, 2.5 times the number of cups. So if I'm given 4 cups of flour, I need 2.5 times that number of units to give me the number of units in grams of salt. So I need 10 grams of salt. So here's the graph. And I made a mistake on the graph, but I'm going to leave it because I had to calculate, I had to figure out the scales, and then I realized I didn't go up far enough. So I'm going to show you the first time, and then I'm going to show you the correction that I had to make. So I was just looking at, so there's 14 units, 14 lines, and it's 10 cups of flour. I had forgotten that I have to get 23 cups of flour on the graph. So I was just focused on the 10. So I thought, well, I just count by ones and go out to 10. And for the grams of honey, 10 10 cups of flour gives you 25 grams of honey. So you go up to 25. And if you count by twos, so 2 times 14 is 28. So that puts you in a nice range to include 25 on the scale. So I counted by twos, that gets me up to 26, and 25 is just halfway right there. And then you graph it. So you know that 0, 0 is on the graph because it's a proportional relationship. If you don't have any cups of flour, then you don't have any grams of salt. And from the table, we know that 4 cups of flour, you need 10 grams of salt. So I would draw an arrow up to here, through that point, draw an arrow in this direction. Where they intersect is that point right there. That is the relationship between the cups of flour and the grams of salt. It is on that line. And then if you go, continue up, if you go to 10 cups of flour, and now if you draw the line, you can go up to here, and it's going to intersect with an arrow that's drawn out this way. So where those two arrows intersect, that's the relationship. So for 10 cups of flour, you needed 25 grams of salt. So 10 cups of flour, 25 grams of salt. And as I mentioned before, I forgot to put the 23 on here. I didn't go out far enough. So I'm going to redo this. Let's do the unit rate first. This is the equation. So the number of grams of salt is 2.5 times the number of cups of flour. And so if you use 23 cups of flour, you need 2.5 times that amount, which means it's going to work out to 57.5 grams of salt is what you need. Let's look at the unit rate just for a second. If you have 1 cup of flour, how many grams of salt are you going to use? Well, this is counting by twos. Don't forget that. So 3 is about right here. So halfway in between 2 and 3 is about right there. So that's 2.5 grams of salt. All right, so let's fix the axes. And this is okay to do. You know, you have to redo things and think through things. It's okay. So I'm focused on this 57.5 grams. Now I have to make the scale on this y-axis go at least up to 57.5, and 60 would be a good choice, because if I count by 5s, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, on up to 50, 55, 60, well, 57.5 is actually halfway between 55 and 60. So that's a pretty good choice. So 57.5 is right here. So I'm going to draw an arrow this way. All right, now this axis has to go out to 23. Well, 25 would get me, so now I have to focus on 23 cups. This would get me out to 25 if I count by 2. Actually, it gets me out farther. 25, 26, 27, 28. So I'm looking at the 23 and I'm thinking, oh, gee, I should probably try to get out to 25. If I count by twos, 23 is going to be right here. And again, that's halfway in between 22 and 24. So that looks like it's a pretty good choice for the scale. These are called the scales. So what marks and what numbers you put on these lines are the scales that you're choosing. So the label is flours in cups, and the label is salt in grams. So draw an arrow from 23 all the way up where those two lines, those two arrows intersect. That's the point. That's telling you that it's for 23 cups of flour, you need 57.5 grams of salt. So that's the relationship between flour and salt. And if you look at the other 2 points that we put on there, 4 cups of flour, 10 grams of salt, 10 cups of flour, 25 grams of salt. And here's the equation once again. So all I did was expand the scale. I just moved the scale farther out to fit on there the 23 cups of flour and 57.5 grams of salt. So here are the equations. Here's the graph. We used the table before. You could turn this into a description. And those are the 4 representations. This is problem card and data card number 2. So work together with a partner and go through these 4 representations I didn't write a description for you. You guys can do that on your own.